Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. As I spoke in my last class that according to the syllabus we would cover the Holy Quran and science, and I chose to discuss the subject of the jinn or jinn from the Holy Quran and how it relates to science. This I chose to take the section which covers this subject from Khalifa Rabi Rahmanullah's book, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge and Truth, part 5, pages 363 to 368. And it will go into depth about the jinn, and it's very interesting. And also the book itself covers in other sections on the subject of jinn, but inshallah today we will just cover this section from part 5. Huzur says that prepare now to undertake a journey upon the wings of scientific vision into the ancient past to explore the nature and identity of the jinn. The Quranic concept of jinn has been briefly discussed before in Life in the Perspective of Quranic Revelations. That's in the same book. Arabic lexicon mentions the following as the possible meanings of the word jinn. It literally means anything which has the connotation of concealment, invisibility, seclusion, and remoteness. It also has the connotation of thick shades and dark shadows. That is why the word Jannah, from the same root word, is employed by the Quran to denote paradise, which would be full of thick, heavy shaded gardens. The word jinn is also applicable to snakes which habitually remain hidden from common view and live a life secluded from other animals in rock crevices and earthen holes. It is also applied to women who observe segregation and to such chieftains as keep their distance from the common people. The inhabitants of remote, inaccessible mountains are likewise referred to as jinn. Hence, anything which lies beyond the reach of common sight or is invisible to the unaided naked eye could well be described by this word. This proposition is fully endorsed by a tradition of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, in which he strongly admonishes people not to use dried up lumps of dung or bones of dead animals for cleaning themselves after attending to the call of nature, because they are food for the jinn. As we use toilet paper now, at that time people used lumps of earth, stones, or any dry article close at hand to clean themselves. We can safely infer, therefore, that when he referred to as jinn was nothing other than some invisible organisms which feed on rotting bones, dung, etc. Remember that the concept of bacteria and viruses was not till then born. No man had ever the vaguest idea about the existence of such invisible tiny creatures. Amazingly, it is to these that the Holy Prophet ﷺ referred. The Arabic language could offer him no better, more appropriate expression than the word jinn. Another important observation made by the Quran is in relation to the creation of the jinn. They are described as having been born out of blasts of fire from the cosmos. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والجان خلقناه من قبل من نار السموم. The translation of this ayat is from chapter 15, verses 28. And the jinn we created before that, the creation of man, from blasts of fire. And here Hazur mentioned the word blast of fire is from the Arabic word naris samum. Here the adjective used to describe the nature of the particle fire, here the adjective used to describe the nature of the particular fire from which the jinn were created is samum, which means a blazing fire or a blast that has no smoke. We find a similar statement in another Quranic verse. وَخَلَقَ الْجَنَّ مِن مَّارِجٍ مِّن نَارٍ. And the jinn he created from the flame of fire. Having established that the word jinn applies here to some type of bacterial organisms, let us again turn our attention to the verses quoted above that speak of the jinn as having been created out of fire. The prime candidates for the application of these verses seem to be such minute organisms as drew the energy for their existence directly from hot blazes of lightning, samum, and cosmic radiation. Dickerson inadvertently agrees with the Quranic view when he observes that most ancient organisms, quote, would have lived on the energy of lightning and ultraviolet radiation. This scenario of cosmic radiation is not specifically mentioned in the work of other scientists in their search for the prebiotic organisms, but they too have corroborated the idea that whatever organisms existed before biotic evolution must have drawn their energy directly from heat. Of all the categories of bacteria classified as the most ancient, only prokaryotes and eukaryotes were mentioned by previous generations of scientists. However, that conclusion proved to be a hasty drawn one, according to Carl R. Woese and his colleagues. They observed, quote, simply because there are two types of cells at the microscopic level, it does not follow that there must be only two types at the molecular level. For the benefit of the lay reader, the difference between the two bacteria known as prokaryotes and eukaryotes is explained in terms as simple as possible. It relates to the presence of absence of a nucleus in them. The prokaryote type of bacteria, despite having a well-defined cell membrane, have no distinct nucleus. The eukaryotes, on the other hand, possess well-defined and well-developed nuclei occupying the center of each cell. It was considered that these were the only two ancient forms of bacteria which gave birth to others and evolved into organisms which could be referred to as the ancestors of life. However, Woese published the findings of this pioneer research in Scientific America, June 1981, claiming that archaic bacteria could be rightly considered as the earliest form of organisms. So, although Hazur doesn't describe here the meaning of archaebacteria, but according to its meaning, we find that they are microorganisms that are similar to bacteria in size and simplicity of structure. Carrying on with what Hazur wrote, he said that he and his colleagues informed the scientific community that they were a third distinct line which preceded all others. Thus it is they who should be entitled as the most ancient ancestors of life. Woese and his collaborators continued to pour strong evidence into this discovery, and as the ice began to thaw, according to Woese, quote, although a few biologists still dispute our interpretation, the idea that archaebacteria present a separate grouping at the highest level is becoming generally accepted, end quote. Again, he writes, quote, this implies that the methogenes are as old as or older than any other bacterial group, end quote. According to Hutchinson Dictionary of Science, quote, the archaebacteria are related to the earliest life forms which appeared about 4 billion years ago, when there was little oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere, end quote. But the author of Genetics, a Molecular Approach states, quote, since 1977, more and more differences between archaebacteria and other prokaryotes have been found, so much so that microbiologists now favor the term of archaea to emphasize that these organisms are distinct from bacteria. The organisms referred to as jinn in the Quran seems to fit the above description. But though scientists unanimously describe these bacteria as possessing the potential of drawing their energy from heat, they are not mentioned as having been originally created directly by the cosmic rays and blasts of lightning by any scientist other than Dickerson. The rest, however, continue to throw more light on their various modes of independence on heat for their survival. In undersea vents, hot springs, the Dead Sea, and salt pans, and have even adapted to refuse tips. On the issue of antiquity, though, Woese and his colleagues have no doubt that the archaebacteria are the prime claimants. According to some scientists, they may have evolved from some unknown parenthood simultaneously, but these are issues which fall outside the domain of this exercise. Whether the other bacteria evolved out of them or not is irrelevant to the discussion. The relevant point is that all forms of most ancient bacteria draw their energy directly from heat. This is a tribute of no small magnitude to the Quranic declaration made over 1400 years ago. وَالْجَانَّ خَلَقْنَاهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ مِنْ نَارِ السَّمُومِ. And the jinn we created before that from blasts of fire, Nar as-Samum. Chapter 15, verses 28. According to the accepted scientific studies, direct heat from fire had to play a vital role in the creation and maintenance of prebiotic organisms. This, in fact, was the only mode of transfer of energy for the consumption of organized forms of existence during this era. As they multiplied during their uninterrupted proliferation lasting over billions of years, their death must have polluted the oceans while they decayed and fermented, turning the oceans into primordial soup. This will be discussed at greater length in the following chapter. So, inshallah, we will also cover this from a different aspect as well in my next class. If anyone is interested to learn more on this about the jinn and science and how it relates to science, they can study further into it from this amazing book, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge, and Truth. And they will definitely find many new things that they had never come to know about their faith and the Holy Quran, which is a book which spoke about the details in quite detail of the creation of the universe. And it's fascinating as readers that we are able to come across this information when we are sitting in an age when those in this world who claim to believe in God, at the same time they also explain that we have no explanation as to how God created everything. We have no explanation as to how God exists. And this is the link that we have, the Holy Quran, with our God, because the Holy Quran explains how things were created. And we are seeing the fact that it must have been God who created this universe, because this factual science, the things that have been proven to come out to be true in science, are corroborated by the Holy Quran, which have been written over 13 or 1400 years ago to the future generations who would come to learn, which we are now coming to learn about, the origins of the creation. So it's a fascinating subject. Always whenever we start delving deep into the Holy Quran and the meanings, we always start finding so many prophecies or truths that Allah has already informed man when man had no ability whatsoever to know what was in those texts or in those revelations from Allah. So inshallah, we'll leave it at that, and inshallah I will continue with science in the Holy Quran. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.